nous avons un panel à présent sur les guidelines, accès à l'information et les élections, qui sera conduit par le vice-président.
Distinguished delegates from non-state actors, good afternoon. And I, as Special Rapporteur on freedom of expression and access to information in Africa, I welcome all of you to this panel, which is on access to information and elections in Africa. Now, I should begin by saying that those of you who are in Nouakchott, the 62nd Ordinary Session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, you may remember that during that session we launched the guidelines on access to information and elections in Africa. Now, when we launched the guidelines, we promised that we would ensure that the guidelines would also be available in Portuguese and also in Arabic. Because at that point, we launched the guidelines only in English and French. So this afternoon, apart from the panel discussion which we are having, we'll also be launching the guidelines both in Portuguese and in Arabic. And so what I'm going to do is I'll set the scene, the context, and then the distinguished panelists who are part of this will speak to various aspects. So I shall introduce the panel at the relevant point after I have provided the context for this afternoon's discussion. Now, so we're discussing the guidelines on access to information and elections. And as I said, these were adopted, in fact, in 2017 and launched in Nouakchott. Now, Article 9(1) of the African Charter provides that every individual shall have the right to receive information. Now, the point about the guidelines, because then the guidelines arise from that basic point, which is framed in Article 9, is that they aim to begin having a discussion between this critical link, which you have in Article 9 and a number of other articles in the Charter, and in particular, Article 13. So Article 13(1) of the Charter, which provides that every citizen shall have the right to participate freely in the government of his country, either directly or through freely chosen representatives in accordance with the provisions of the law. Now, a fundamental element of democracy is the freedom to choose political leaders through elections. Free and fair periodic elections expose candidates' records and proposed policies to a level of public scrutiny that is capable of positively influencing the responsiveness of elected representatives. Now, at the Commission's 18th Extraordinary Session, which was held in 2015, the Commission adopted a resolution which asked the Special Rapporteur at the time to develop guidelines that would address the absence of a regional standard on access to information and elections. So the focus, not generally just on access to information, but specifically in respect of elections, as a means of guaranteeing the credibility of elections and the overall strengthening of democratic governance in Africa. The guidelines are informed by recent experiences across the continent, which illustrate the dangers that the lack of information during the electoral process pose to peace, to security, to stability. So when you look at our elections, the various elections that happen in Africa, you'll see that failures by electoral stakeholders sometimes actually cause things to happen during the elections process. Sometimes they actually cause civil conflict to happen during the elections process. And so what then we were asking for, what the commission was asking for, was that it was important that direction be provided on the sort of information which electoral stakeholders should provide so as to strengthen democratic governance in Africa. The point being that if you provide certain information to citizens, to individuals, if you provide that information proactively during an election process, then what is likely to happen is that people will have the information they require, and there will be no need for high tension, there will be no need for conflict during the process, the actual process of election. And remember, when we speak about elections, we are speaking about the pre-electoral period, the actual period during elections, and the post-election period. So when then you look at the guidelines themselves, the question becomes, who are we speaking about? Who are these electoral stakeholders who are discussed and described in these guidelines? So guidance is provided in relation to a number of electoral stakeholders. One type of electoral stakeholder are the authorities who are responsible for appointing the election management body. So here we're speaking about parliament, we're speaking about the executive, the presidency, to the extent that they are involved in appointing electoral bodies. And the messaging in respect of appointing authorities is that as the body specifically tasked with managing the electoral process, information about the process and criteria for appointment and termination of service of members of election management bodies must be proactively disclosed to ensure the process is open and transparent. And also to ensure that people know, are those who were appointed competent? So if already it's clear how the appointments were made, the basis for the appointments, then citizens, electors will not be wondering whether in fact the chair of the commission as appointed is competent to do their work. So that's one type of stakeholder. The other critical stakeholder are election management bodies. These are electoral commissions. So election management bodies must routinely, proactively disclose information on all their activities, including their operational procedures and the conduct of elections. This is necessary for the overall credibility and integrity of the electoral process. So for example, a few weeks ago, when I undertook an advocacy visit in Nigeria, we had discussions with the Electoral Commission there, and they were saying, you know, coincidentally, actually some or a lot of the information which you're asking that we put out there, we already do. So in fact, then our discussion was, we need actually then to come and have a more technical conversation about actually how we can see towards the full implementation of the guidelines, for example, in respect of the elections next year. And that's part of the discussion we shall have this afternoon. Another stakeholder are political parties, that they must provide information on issues covering their ideology, policies, sources of funding, and resources used during the electoral cycle. It is important that we know these political parties, particularly if you're a ruling party, but even when you're not the ruling party, where are you getting your funding from? So that again, we cannot begin saying that you're being influenced unduly, or that the basis of your resourcing is not proper for purposes of ensuring free and fair elections. Law enforcement agencies, that they must proactively disclose information on their activities in relation to the electoral process. So again, we need to know what the police are communicating, what the standard operating procedures for the police are in respect of the whole elections process. So again, individuals, citizens, electors are aware. Electors are aware which police will be available where, how may they contact the police, what are the standard operating procedures which should be relevant for purposes of ensuring that the election is free, the election is peaceful, managed peacefully, securely. Also, you'll see that when you look at the guidelines, another key stakeholder are election observers and also election monitors, that they must provide information that allows for the assessment of the credibility and integrity of the electoral process to be evaluated by the public. So when election monitors come and say, or observers, that the election was free and fair, we need to know the basis, the criteria beforehand, which they are going to use to make their determinations. And two more critical stakeholders, media and online media platform providers, that they must proactively disclose information allowing an assessment of their fairness and balance. That also is the same in respect of media regulatory bodies. And then finally, civil society organizations. I think sometimes the sense is given that civil society organizations are monitoring everyone else, but they themselves are not being monitored for the work which they do. Here, what the guidelines say is that civil society organizations, that information which reveals potential conflict of interest or political affiliations amongst NGOs or civil society which are working on elections, must be proactively disclosed to allow the activities of CSOs to be placed in proper context. So then, when you look at the guidelines, they provide further context. They establish the principles which guide their operationalization, the operation of the guidelines, and those principles clearly are founded on principles of access to information. And that's part of the discussion which then shall continue moving forward. So then, I think at this point, I can proceed to introduce our first panelist. And so when again we were in the advocacy visit in Nigeria, we had these excellent discussions with the ECOWAS Network of Electoral Commissions, the ECOWAS Network of Electoral Commissions, who coincidentally actually informed us that they had been undertaking a study in a number of West African countries, and which we thought was extremely relevant for the present discussion. So now I wish to invite Mr. Rauf Salami, who is Program Officer at the ECOWAS Network of Electoral Commissions, to speak to us about their perspective as the ECOWAS Network of Electoral Commissions. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Je voudrais tout d'abord remercier la Commission pour cet honneur et cette invitation, ce privilège d'être parmi vous ici. Je suis Raouf Salami, comme a dit le Président. Je représente la commission, le réseau des commissions électorales d'Afrique de l'Ouest, en français le RESAO, le réseau des structures d'administration des élections en Afrique de l'Ouest. En effet, les élections, la gestion des élections il y a 10 ans, il y a 20 ans, n'a rien à voir avec ce que c'est aujourd'hui. du chemin reste à parcourir et le guide d'accès à l'information électorale, édité par la Commission africaine, nous amène à voir qu'il y a encore du progrès en termes d'accès à l'information. Je vais faire une présentation par PowerPoint. La présentation est en anglais, mais je vais parler en français, donc si les anglophones peuvent mettre leur casque. Donc je vais donner un bref aperçu de l'accès à l'information pendant les élections dans la région CEDEAO. Donc pour planter le décor, on peut se poser la question des entités qui génèrent les informations dans la période électorale. Et l'acteur principal ici est l'OGE, l'Organisation de gestion des élections. Vous avez dans le slide une série d'acteurs, plusieurs entités comme les partis politiques, la société civile, les candidats, les groupes de médias, les groupes d'observation qui produisent de l'information. L'acteur principal est l'OGE, c'est l'acteur qui détient la majeure partie de l'information. Quand on parle d'OGE en Afrique de l'Ouest, la situation est diverse, la réalité est en fait complexe. D'un pays à l'autre, nous avons des organisations de gestion qui ont des structures ou des natures très différentes. Les pays lusophones, les pays francophones, les pays anglophones ont des commissions électorales qui n'opèrent pas de la même façon. Nous avons des cas où les élections sont gérées par le ministère de l'administration du territoire, le MATD, dans le cas du Mali, dans le cas du Cap-Vert, le ministère de la Justice, le Sénégal, le ministère de l'Intérieur. Ce fonctionnement n'a rien à voir avec le fonctionnement du Ghana ou du Nigeria, où nous avons affaire à de véritables commissions électorales qui sont indépendantes et qui mènent de bout en bout l'opération. Donc nous avons, suivant le cas, affaire à une multiplicité d'acteurs et des difficultés de communication d'une institution à l'autre. Vous avez des situations où les institutions se renvoient la responsabilité et les parties prenantes ne savent finalement pas qui détient l'information. Et le style de communication est totalement différent d'une institution à l'autre. Alors, quels sont les canaux utilisés pour la diffusion de l'information? Les sites web des commissions électorales sont actifs dans la plupart des cas. Les plateformes de dialogue, de consultation avec les parties prenantes sont une réalité dans notre région. Et le monitoring, par exemple, du défi des médias en ligne est un défi énorme. Dans beaucoup de cas, l'information qui passe par les médias en ligne échappe complètement aux commissions électorales ou aux autorités de régulation des médias. Ce qui est dangereux, car la propagation de fausses nouvelles est énorme en période électorale et on verra plus tard le danger lié à ce genre de situation. Next slide, please. Alors, quel type d'informations sont mises à disposition? Nous avons tous vécu des élections. Nous savons que de la délimitation des circonscriptions électorales jusqu'à la proclamation des résultats, on est inondé d'informations électorales venant de toutes parts. Maintenant, est-ce qu'on nous dit tout? On peut se poser la question. On a une somme d'informations, parfois contradictoires, parfois incohérentes, parfois pas précises. Est-ce qu'on nous dit tout? Next slide, please. Certaines informations sont difficilement mises à disposition et difficiles à obtenir. Et dans l'introduction, le président parlait d'une étude qui a été menée par Econec, par le RESAO, sur le coût des élections. Et durant cette étude, l'accès à l'information était un réel challenge. Comment obtenir de l'information liée aux achats, aux dépenses? Comment dépatouiller le budget approuvé, le budget effectivement mis à disposition et les montants effectivement dépensés? D'un pays à l'autre, la situation est variable. L'information est là, parfois mal archivée, parfois contradictoire, certaines fois elle n'est pas là. L'information dans les détails est un défi majeur. On aime bien nous donner des informations brutes en chiffres globaux. Total pour telle opération, tant de millions. Total pour telle opération, tant de millions. Budget pour tel ministère, tant de milliards. Mais le détail, par ligne budgétaire, ça a été un combat de l'obtenir. Et comme je vous disais, d'un pays à l'autre, la situation est différente. Vous avez des pays où l'information est là, souvent les pays anglophones, qui sont des commissions structurées, avec une véritable stratégie de communication. Et vous avez des pays francophones comme le Sénégal ou le Bénin, où l'information est vague et parfois inexistante parce que le système, la mémoire institutionnelle n'existe pas. Lorsqu'un président de commission s'en va, ou son équipe s'en va, l'information n'est pas disponible. Donc, si on veut faire une comparaison sur plusieurs cycles électoraux, c'est un véritable challenge. L'électeur a besoin de l'information. Le citoyen a besoin de l'information. Le droit d'accès à l'information, le droit à l'information est acquis. Maintenant, la réalité est tout autre. C'est un combat pour changer les mentalités afin d'obtenir les informations dont nous avons besoin pour un choix informé des leaders et tenir les leaders responsables de leurs actes et pouvant rendre des comptes à la société. Alors, vous avez des informations qui sont carrément non disponibles, car le système d'enregistrement ne le permet pas, où l'information est là, mais n'est pas traitée, donc on n'a pas accès, on nous dit que l'information, nous l'avons, mais nous ne pouvons pas vous la donner. La perception, tout ça joue sur la perception des OGE, des organismes de gestion des élections, et bâtir la confiance ou établir la confiance, obtenir la confiance du grand public est une entreprise pas facile. Un long processus. On peut bâtir une réputation en 100 jours, 1000 jours, et la perdre en une journée, juste par un petit incident. Donc, les commissions électorales ou les détenteurs d'informations ou les institutions en charge des élections ont du mal à obtenir cette perception positive et à maintenir cette perception de gens dignes de confiance, de gens sérieux, de gens impartiaux. Malheureusement, le cas qu'on voit souvent, c'est que bâtir la confiance se fait dans l'année électorale. Et en dehors de l'année électorale, il ne se passe rien. Donc le guichet média, c'est pendant les élections qu'on ouvre l'OGE aux médias, aux journalistes. Le guichet genre, les plateformes de dialogue se passent dans les élections. En dehors des élections, rien ne se passe quasiment en termes de maintenir ou bâtir la confiance avec les électeurs. Next slide, please. Je voudrais juste donner quelques exemples concrets parce que j'ai l'impression de parler que de théorie. Donc sur ce slide, vous avez deux exemples. Alors, deux exemples pris pendant la présidentielle du Mali, où il a été question de 2 listes d'électeurs, 2 fichiers électoraux en circulation. Comment a-t-on pu en arriver là? Alors, il y a une liste d'électeurs qui a été auditée par l'OIF, qui est la liste officielle, et ensuite, l'institution en charge du fichier électoral a publié sur son site web une liste qui apparemment présentent des différences jusqu'à 1,2 million d'électeurs. L'opposition s'est insurgée, l'affaire est devenue une affaire d'État, menace de boycott, et heureusement, avec la médiation, ils ont pu s'entendre sur quelle était la vraie liste. Un autre exemple, c'est toujours au Mali. Pendant la présidentielle, l'élection n'a pas eu lieu dans 716 bureaux de vote. 716 bureaux de vote sur 23 041 bureaux de vote. La commission électorale, disons le ministère en charge des élections, ne donne pas l'information précise sur qu'est-ce que représentent les 716 bureaux de vote et qu'est-ce qui s'est réellement passé. La population apprend qu'il y a eu dispersion d'électeurs, attaque d'hommes masqués armés, mais qu'est-ce que ça a comme impact sur le processus? Il n'y a pas eu vote, point. Alors après demande d'insistance des partis d'opposition, du public, de la société civile, une information qui correspond à 716 bureaux de vote. C'est-à-dire qu'avant qu'on ne sache que c'est 716, on a dit il y a des bureaux de vote. Donc imprécision de l'information, ce qui a donné lieu à beaucoup de suspicions et des accusations de fraude et les rumeurs que vous entendez quand vous n'êtes pas au Mali. Next slide, please. Un exemple un peu plus positif de bonne pratique, c'est l'exemple de la Sierra Leone, où, pour cause d'indisponibilité de bulletins de vote, yes, okay. Indisponibilité de bulletins de vote, erreur de colissage, l'élection est reportée dans des districts précis. On donne le nom des districts, on donne le nom des bureaux de vote, la liste est communiquée dans un point de presse. Tout ça est clair. La Sierra Leone nous donne là l'exemple d'une bonne gestion de la communication électorale. Next slide, please. La propagation de fausses nouvelles. Ici, sur le slide, vous avez différents exemples. Le Bénin, où on a trouvé des bulletins de vote saisis par la douane, il s'agissait des spécimens. Explosion dans un centre de vote au Nigeria, il s'agissait de pétards. La police a arrêté ici, en Gambie, un individu qui a introduit du chewing-gum pour bloquer des billes. Il s'agissait d'une bille de diamètre plus large qui n'arrivait pas et qu'on a remplacée pendant le vote. Tout ça pour dire que la manipulation de l'information ou le manque d'information correspond à un défi toujours important. Alors, je vais conclure simplement en parlant de recommandations. OK. Sensibiliser le public large sur le droit d'accès à l'information est une recommandation pour la région. Réformer la loi électorale afin de l'adapter au droit d'accès à l'information. Sensibiliser aux dangers de la propagation des fausses nouvelles, car ça peut amener violence électorale, guerre civile. Apporter de l'assistance technique aux commissions électorales afin de renforcer leur unité de communication, harmoniser les pratiques en matière d'accès à l'information d'un pays à l'autre et promouvoir les bonnes pratiques en termes de communication. Je vais m'en tenir là. La présentation n'était pas, contrairement à ce qui a été annoncé, centrée sur l'étude, sur le coût des élections. L'étude est validée, le document n'est pas publié, mais si vous avez des questions précisément en charge de coût d'élection, je peux répondre à on peut les prendre et en discuter. Je vous remercie.
Muito obrigada, Sr. Presidente, Vice-Presidente, Dr. Muto. Muito obrigada, Sra. Presidente, distintos delegados, caras ONGs. A mim coube a responsabilidade de fazer a leitura sobre as diretrizes e a apresentação dos objetivos e a fundamentação. Passo a lê-lo. A Lei Modelo sobre Acesso à Informação em África, adotada em fevereiro de 2013, sem dúvida contribuiu para a melhoria do cenário legislativo de acesso à informação em África. Contudo, de forma geral, os Estados, incluindo aqueles com disposições constitucionais e leis sobre o acesso à informação, têm sido, em termos gerais, lentos em avançar com a divulgação proativa de informação em seus processos diários de governação. Estas diretrizes providenciam orientações sobre o acesso à informação em processos eleitorais como uma forma ou via de fortalecimento da governação democrática em África. Experiências recentes em todo o continente ilustram os perigos que a falta de informação durante o processo eleitoral representa para a paz, a segurança e a estabilidade. No melhor dos casos, a falta pelas partes interessadas no processo eleitoral de divulgação de informação de matéria proativa gera desconfianças e suspeitas. No pior dos cenários, quando combinado com tensões latentes de ordem étnica, religiosa e outra índole, pode facilmente degenerar em violência quando os eleitores expressam a sua frustração por repressão real ou suposta. Tensões civis e conflitos que resultam em mortes, deslocações internas de populações, desespero, têm deixado muito frequentemente as suas marcas no segmento de eleições contestadas. Por isso, é extremamente importante ser proativo no fortalecimento da informação sobre o processo eleitoral. Um princípio estrutural no âmago do direito de acesso à informação é o da divulgação proativa. Este princípio exige que aqueles que detêm informação de interesse público devem rotineiramente disponibilizar esta informação ao público, ainda que tal não tenha sido solicitado. Essa informação deve ser disponibilizada em formatos de fácil acesso e deve tomar em consideração as necessidades daqueles que a recebem. A divulgação proativa de informação relativa aos processos eleitorais é, assim, uma ferramenta que, a condicionar prestação de contas e transparência dos atores eleitorais chaves, com o que se garante a credibilidade e integridade do processo eleitoral. Em conformidade com o artigo 1º da Carta Africana, que exige que os Estados-partes adotem medidas legislativas ou de outra natureza para dar efeito aos direitos, deveres e liberdades consagradas na Carta, os Estados-partes devem, portanto, assegurar-se de que todos os atores do processo eleitoral cumpram a responsabilidade de divulgação proativa de informação sobre o processo eleitoral. O objetivo destas diretivas é fornecer orientações aos Estados sobre as categorias de informação sobre o processo eleitoral que devem, no mínimo, ser divulgadas de maneira proativa. As diretivas complementam, mas não substituem a legislação, as políticas, bem como as práticas e procedimentos de acesso à informação sobre o processo eleitoral que estejam em conformidade com a Carta Africana e outras normas, assim como as melhores práticas sobre a matéria. As diretivas providenciam orientação aos atores do processo eleitoral que tenham responsabilidade de divulgação proativa de informação de diversas categorias de informações sobre sua guarda ou controle e que sejam necessárias para resguardar a integridade e a legitimidade do processo eleitoral. Orientações são fornecidas em relação às seguintes partes interessadas. A. Autoridades responsáveis pela designação dos órgãos de gestão eleitoral. B. Órgãos de gestão eleitoral. C. Partidos políticos e candidatos. D. Entidades responsáveis pela aplicação da lei. E. Observadores e monitores eleitorais. Linha F. plataformas de provisão de média tradicional e média online, linha G, órgãos reguladores dos meios de comunicação social e organizações da sociedade civil. Para concluir, estas diretivas irão ajudar as partes interessadas no processo eleitoral, não somente para que possam identificar nas categorias específicas as informações relacionadas com eleições que devem ser divulgadas de forma proativa ao público, mas também para que possam desenvolver sistemas e processos de modo a expandir o acesso à informação em todo o processo eleitoral. Acredito que estas diretivas propiciarão um melhor exercício do direito de acesso à informação, assim como o direito ao voto e à livre participação na vida política pelos africanos em todo o continente. Finalmente, expressar o meu reconhecimento e os meus agradecimentos a todas as partes interessadas, incluindo atores estatais e não estatais, sem o apoio e contribuição dos quais estas diretivas jamais teriam sido elaboradas. Reconheço e agradeço à comissária Pansi Tlakula, relatora especial a quem sucedi, cuja visão e energia conceberam e dirigiram este processo até a finalização. Pelo Dr. Laurence Murugo Mute, relator especial para a liberdade de expressão e acesso à informação em África e vice-presidente da Comissão Africana dos Direitos Humanos e dos Povos, em novembro de 2017. Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much, Joanna Cortez. So finally, before we open it to the plenary, I wish to invite Mark Skadiri of the Open Society Justice Initiative, who I think lives and breathes access to information. He's extremely passionate on the issues, and so we couldn't get a better person to round off the discussion for us. Maxwell.
Thank you, Commissioner, Chairperson, all protocols observed. It's an honor and privilege to be part of this distinguished panel, and just to share a few insights on what some of us consider to be very topical, which is why, like Commissioner said, we live and breathe this issue. I think a few points, and thanks to the other members of the panel for the very informative contributions that have been shared thus far. But I also think that there are a few points that also need to be emphasized for purposes of this conversation. Like many of us are well aware, Article 9 of the African Charter basically enshrines the right of access to information. And interestingly, not just the Charter, but at least about 6 other instruments of the AU reference the right of access to information as a key requirement in terms of the organizing framework of member states of the African Union. It's also instructive to make the point that presently, I think as at either February or I think sometime in April, about 24 states of the AU have so far adopted national level laws on access to information, the latest being the Republic of Seychelles. And that process was also enhanced by the model law on access to information in Africa that had been developed and adopted by this august body back in February, on February 22nd, 2013. But you might want to ask the question, why a set of guidelines on access to information and elections? Why is it important? It's important for very many reasons, but 2 cardinal things are key to keep in mind here. The fact that access to information is unique because not only is it a standalone right, it's also a utility right. So it enables the realization of various other rights, whether civil and political, socioeconomic or cultural rights. And nothing dramatizes that issue more glaringly than in the context of elections, which includes what is encapsulated in Article 13 of the African Charter, which is the right to participate. And that is why this august body also thought that it was instructive and important to begin to look at this particular right in that context. So when you look at the language of Resolution 307 adopted by the Commission at its 18th extraordinary session in Kenya, it basically says that it was looking in this area to look at access to information and election as a means of guaranteeing the credibility of elections and the overall strengthening of the democratic governance process in Africa. So to the extent that as a recurring decimal in our continent, we've had challenges with elections in terms of credibility, in terms of acceptance, in terms of the level of fairness, and several other things that you may want to speak about. So there was no better place to start this conversation than in the context of the utility of access to information and the whole question of election. And it's also instructive to bear in mind the fact that globally, this body is the first institution to have developed these soft law standards that seeks to interrogate access to information as a utility vehicle for enhancing the democratic process. And other bodies globally are beginning to learn about this through the work of this institution. But it is also not enough to have this set of soft law standards developed. It's also important to engage with member states to then see how they can actually deploy it in the process, which is why the experience shared by our brother from ECONEC is also very useful. And we are hoping that other sub-regions of the continent would also basically key into this and begin to see how do we internalize and utilize access to information right through the electoral spectrum. But I would just like to focus on a few key issues here while I round up so that we can have the floor available for conversation. There are certain key principles, that are inherent in the access to information discourse. Whether the issue of affirming that this is a fundamental right, which applies across board, or B, the whole question of how do you having a robust information management system. So the duty to keep, organize, maintain records in a way that enhances access to information. But a key concern, which is where we need to then look at, is the whole question of the conversation around exemptions. And that is where these set of principles and in terms of these guidelines become critical, because to the extent that the electoral process is key for underpinning democracy and the right to participation, then we need to emphasize the issue of proactive disclosure. And that is why these guidelines emphasize proactive disclosure as the entry point. So it's not access to information in the context of people making requests. It is actually access to information in the context of the different stakeholders in the electoral process having a responsibility to proactively disclose information. And that is the cardinal principle that needs to be borne in mind. So you are not supposed to be looking at how do we exempt information disclosure, but rather how do we enhance information disclosure and information dissemination. And I say this advisedly because even in many of the member states that have access to information laws in their statute books, what many of them emphasize is how do we still within that framework exempt information disclosure. So you get a sense where they want to give with one hand and then take back with the other, which essentially defeats the fundamental value of this right. So in the context of this conversation, what we need to bear in mind is the fact that what needs to be looked at is proactive disclosure of information and not exemption or prevention of disclosure of information, which is the fallback process for many state parties. And that can also be linked to the history of official secrecy, which exists in many state parties, whether under the civil law or the common law regime. So as we get into this conversation, I would encourage all of us, including member states here gathered, to basically enhance the value of the disclosure of information by enshrining proactive disclosure in the context of the electoral management process, both pre the actual elections and post-elections. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Max. I think at this point, we should open this for discussion. And we invite states and also other delegates, non-state delegates, to indicate that they wish to take the floor, because I'm sure there are people who want to take the floor. Lesotho?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Allow me to also thank the panel, including yourself, on a very important subject. Whilst Lesotho is very much in agreement and supporting the guidelines as provided to us, we also would like to just maybe want to understand, if not advising, to say member states through their regional economic communities have some existing structures which provide for the access to information on electoral issues, and even these guidelines actually emanate from the African Union principles and guidelines governing democratic elections. When I looked through the document very quickly, I picked up a few things that actually emanate from the same protocol. I don't know whether or not the AU chart, the AU principles and guidelines governing democratic elections in Africa was consulted on this matter. But suffice to say, Mr. Chairman, that it doesn't really make any difference. As a continent, we have, I think, the collective approach in addressing some of the electoral issues. It was just for me to say, whilst we have these documents, we also should be able to bring together the already existing documents so that we empower or give more power to the documents that we are presenting today. Maybe just a little bit of it to say, in some of the regions, in particular the Southern African Development Community, we have what we call the SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections. Now, some member states in the region have already domesticated these principles to make laws that bind, but now also to mention that the region has its own structure which follows up in ensuring access to this information, such as the SADC Electoral Advisory Council, which member states have created in line with the principles to ensure that there is actually an access to all necessary information for member states and individual citizens in the electoral processes. We also have the SADC Election Commissions Forum, which is the membership of all member states' electoral management bodies, also addressing the very similar issues. Now, Mr. Chairman, I should hope that even ECOWAS has the same structure. And if that is the case, and other regional economic communities and regional mechanisms, maybe to bring them together, look into how some of these provisions in these documents could be harmonized to avoid a duplication of some of these things. Election is a very tense process where some others oppose, others are the ones who would want to win. Now that process creates so much pressure on the electoral management bodies in countries, whereby even certain minor things which are critical to this process can be omitted, probably not deliberately, but because of the need for more information coming from almost all angles that they may not be able to shoulder. But of course, as I say, we are supporting these guidelines. We want to say to you, we appreciate, and we will definitely take them to incorporate some of them into our existing electoral laws. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, distinguished delegate from Lesotho. In fact, your point is extremely well taken. When you look at the preamble of the guidelines, in fact, you will note that the preamble takes account of the various previous electoral instruments, whether global, but particularly continental instruments, and also sub-regional instruments, indeed including the SADC principles, which you have alluded to. And in fact, recalling one of the points which Maxwell has just made, then yes, indeed, I'm sure those instruments cover the whole panoply of elections issues at the regional or sub-regional level. And so now the focus here, which the guidelines has taken up, will then be the discussion around a comprehensive approach and suggestion in respect particularly of proactive disclosure and elections, and again in respect of the various stakeholders. But then again, I'm sure the panel will also make some responses as we finish. But do I see more hands? Huh? Algeria.
Merci et merci aux deux panélistes pour leur exposé. L'accès à l'information et la transparence dans les processus électoraux est quelque chose de tout à fait fondamental dans les sociétés démocratiques. Nous savons très bien que dans les élections, il y a toujours quelque part des contestations qui interviennent au terme d'une élection parce qu'une des parties en général n'est pas satisfaite soit du déroulement de la campagne électorale, soit durant le scrutin, soit au moment de la proclamation des résultats. L'accès à l'information, je ne sais pas, peut-être que j'ai raté pendant la présentation, pose une problématique ou une antinomie entre le droit d'accéder à l'information et plus particulièrement dans certains contextes au fichier électoral et le droit à la protection des données personnelles des électeurs. L'État, que ce soit les ministères dans certains pays ou les commissions électorales, sont les gardiens du fichier électoral. Ils n'en sont pas les propriétaires. Comment peut-on donner des informations sur l'identité, l'adresse, la généalogie du corps électoral? C'est un souci qui se pose et qui met en conflit deux genres de droits. La protection des données personnelles des citoyens et le droit à l'accès de l'information. Dans certains contextes, et je me souviens, j'ai servi dans un pays où l'Union européenne, qui a supervisé l'élection, a demandé au pays, à ce pays-là, de lui donner le fichier électoral. Et le ministre de la Justice a dit, le fichier n'est pas ma propriété, c'est la propriété des citoyens, et je ne peux pas vous le donner. Alors je ne sais pas si on peut avoir un éclairage sur le point d'équilibre qu'il y a lieu de trouver entre la protection des données personnelles et le devoir de transparence, le devoir d'accéder à l'information. Je vous remercie.
Okay, so thank you, Algeria. Thank you, Lesotho, for your comments. I think as I hand it back to those of the panelists who may wish to make some responses, it doesn't have to be all of you, just those who have points they wish to raise. I think just addressing the last point, which was made by Algeria. In fact, it's a particularly relevant point to the current discussion. The whole point about data. If you ask yourself, which of our institutions manage the biggest or the largest amounts of our personal data, the electoral commissions would usually come up there. They are up there. And so, classically, if you take the example of Kenya, you have situations where the Electoral Commission has all this personal data, including names and identity numbers and where particular voters perhaps reside, and telephone numbers perhaps. And before you know it, politicians are actually calling you and they are lobbying you and they're asking you to vote for one party or another party. And you're not quite sure, where did they get this data from? And perhaps even the voters' rolls themselves or that data is being sold. So yes, and that's a balance I think which Max was speaking about earlier, that distinction between then on what basis might exemptions also take place. But what I want to do at this point is which of my panelists wishes to respond? Something was mentioned about in respect of the West African ICONEC. Perhaps you can briefly, 1 minute, respond to that.
Thank you very much. On the question from Lesotho, the person from Lesotho, you rightly mentioned that SADC has its guidelines or instrument on election management. It has code of conduct, guidelines on observation. In West Africa, we have all the equivalent in the ECOWAS region. I work for ECOWAS network of Electoral Commission, which is the equivalent of ECF SADC. I'm just coming from Maseru, where we celebrated 20th anniversary. So we collaborate closely. If I'm invited to celebrate 20 years and learn lessons from 20 years of achievement of ECF SADC, we work together. And these guidelines is taking us further in terms of access to information, further in terms of procedures and system of record of information and how to protect or disseminate information. Those issues have been not as deeply dealt with in the instruments. So these instruments are living instruments, and these guidelines is arriving at the right time where we need to improve on access and reflect on some issues regarding access to information. Thank you very much.
Joanna, do you want to take the floor? Or Max?
Okay, Commissioner, thank you so much. All I would do is 2 quick comments to reiterate what Raouf Salami said. In the process of drafting these guidelines, we reviewed all those instruments that the state delegate from Lesotho referenced. And if you look at the preambles, specifically on page 8 and 9, you will see them listed. And we did an analysis, and like Raouf had said, there were gaps. And those gaps are what this instrument tries to fill. And also bear in mind the fact that the Commission had adopted a model law on access to information in 2013. And that model law on access to information actually advanced the discussion on access to information in terms of legislation and in terms of creating a continent-wide benchmark against which state parties' access to information bills or laws will be evaluated. And to the extent that that particular model law represents, in terms of best practice, the most advanced text globally, not just speaking in the context of Africa, it only became more imperative for the instruments that you referenced to also be improved upon through this set of guidelines. So in the context of Lesotho, for example, there is no national level access to information legislation in place presently. And the whole idea of this conversation is to then encourage member states who already see the need for access to information in the context of elections to deepen that particular conversation in the context of elections, looking particularly at proactive disclosure, which is the need to, as a default mechanism, always disclose information and not the reactive framework of waiting for a request for information or preempting a refusal of a request on the basis of an exemption. And that's where the difference then comes in. So we're actually hoping that the existing processes that you have in the SADC region, for example, will take this set of guidelines and run with them to enhance what you already have to the extent that is a pan-continental instrument. Now, in the context of the comment and the statement by the state delegate from Algeria, Interestingly, that's a point that remains very valid in the context of the current discourse, which is creating a balance between the right to privacy, data protection, and access to information. And when you look at, in the context of Africa, for example, two examples exist now. In the context of South Africa, you've got the information regulator, which sets up the oversight mechanisms for access to information and issues around data protection. If you look at the context of Kenya, where Commissioner Mute comes from, the access to information legislation of 2016 makes a provision that the same oversight mechanism will deal with access to information and data protection. And the real thing to bear in mind is that the right to privacy or personal information is not mutually exclusive from access to information. Rather, when you look at any standard access to information law, in the terms of the range of exemptions, you would find that personal information exists as a possible exemption, but to be guided by the three-part test, which is, one, that the exemption must be stated in the law; two, that the information to be exempted, there must be a threat that basically puts the safety and security of society at risk; and then thirdly, that particular harm must override the right of the public to access that information. And that principle, which is enshrined in the model law, should guide every conversation on exemption. So it's not the case that they are in conflict, but they can be mutually reinforcing. And that is what these guidelines and the model law all try to emphasize. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Merci. Juste pour compléter, monsieur de l'Algérie, vous me suivez? OK. Vous avez évoqué le droit à la protection de l'information. Les lois électorales, nous imposent ou imposent aux commissions électorales d'afficher la liste électorale. Et cette liste électorale, ça peut varier d'un pays à l'autre, a des informations sensibles. L'intention, c'est de mettre l'information publique pour que lorsqu'il y a erreur, l'erreur puisse être corrigée. L'intention, c'est d'indiquer aux votants là où il doit voter. Donc, dans la loi, il y a cette obligation d'afficher. Le jour du vote, il y a la liste des électeurs à l'entrée du bureau de vote, parce que vous pouvez rentrer dans un centre et vous faites 10 000 bureaux de vote, 5 bureaux de vote sans savoir où vous votez. Donc, il y a une nécessité de donner l'information. Malheureusement, ça pose ce problème de protection d'information. Je suis d'accord avec vous. Par rapport à l'UE, juste un mot dessus. Oui, ça nous aide. Oui, il y a la question de la souveraineté. L'UE, dans certains pays, demande le résultat bureau de vote par bureau de vote. Et le pays dit, moi je suis souverain, je fais ce que je veux, je donne les résultats compilés. Est-ce que c'est de la transparence? Ils sont souverains. Est-ce que la loi les oblige de donner? Oui, au bureau de vote, à chaque représentant de parti. Donc, on a des fois du mal entre la pratique et le droit. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, as we stand to thank you so much. First, I think we should thank our panel for their excellent inputs. As we finish, again, I should also thank the government of Nigeria for agreeing that I should visit them, which I did a few weeks ago, to provide advice on Article 9 issues, including this particular issue on elections. And again, I offer as special rapporteur my technical support to any state which wishes that I come and engage with them around how to implement Article 9 of the Charter, and in respect particularly either of the model law on access to information or on elections and access to information. So I look forward to those engagements. I think so, therefore, the chair will help us. This time, I think we are being very specific. Last time we launched the English and French. Now it's the Arabic and Portuguese. So I think we should stand and do what we usually do. Thank you very much.